Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, March 16th, 2018. I believe that's the year we're in. Who knows? I feel like I'm all woozy from Stephen Hawking's time traveler party still. We're ready to roll with yet another show, despite the fact that the United States federal government not ready to roll anywhere. I don't know if there's anybody left to talk about. We'll have to speak about all the other people in orbit around Trump. The government's closed. Not really. I mean, we should be careful about that because we do discuss the government closing down fairly frequently here. Not what we mean. It's just that everybody's been fired, reassigned, whatever. I don't know. It's a crazy time. And it's Friday. So that means we got to get ready for a weekend worth of more craziness. I'll be completely out of touch and having no idea what goes on. Well, I was going to say for Saturday, but really for the rest of the show. I don't know what's happening. We'll catch up, see what craziness is going on this morning, tomorrow. Big day for the scout troop, the two kids in the scout troop. The two kids, mine. There are others. It's a troop of them. We're delivering mulch. Yay! Delivering mulch tomorrow. So lots of lugging of 40-pound bags of mulch. The weather not really working with us, per se, at this point, but hopefully the bags won't be too wet. Don't know what my role in all this is going to be. Last year I was just loading all the trucks, so I moved every single one of those 40-pound bags. But, of course, we were moving them on pallets of 45 bags each using a forklift. But it's heavy and dirty work, and I'm not looking forward to it. I'm already dreading it. I'd like to take a nap right now is what I'm saying. Let's begin, shall we? The whole place is falling apart. Bill knows it, all the way up in Portland, Maine. You can hear the slamming of government doors behind people, occasionally with asses being hit by those doors as they shut, though they have been warned not to let that happen. And yet it still occurs. Daily Coast Radio is live now. Kagro X, that's me, and how you can reach me on Twitter. David Waldman by day. Kagro X by Twitter by day and by night, all night long. Unfortunately, I can't sleep any longer. Confirms that we elected a lunatic who surrounds himself with other lunatics, and we're all going to die. It's true. That's right. I can confirm that. Plus, easy 5-minute casserole recipes the whole family will love, briefly, before being annihilated in the flames of nuclear holocaust. Okay. Good morning. Happy Friday. A little bit of light snowfall in our area to brighten the mood before impending doom. And, man, so many things happening today. Lots of people talking about, for instance, what The Hill is talking about as they capture my attention with two photos. Not one, but two photos. Stormy Daniels makes the Steele dossier look more plausible. And in case you haven't actually given that any thought, that's obviously very true. We discussed the interesting legal maneuver the folks at BuzzFeed, well, the folks at BuzzFeed's lawyer's office, anyway, came up with in using the very obvious comparison. Now, Michael Cohen apparently in the business of negotiating hush money deals for Trump personally, for the Trump organization, for the Trump campaign, maybe all three, maybe some combination of two out of the three, perhaps just one. But it seems like that's part of his line of work, and that will open things up in both cases, very interestingly. So we got that going on. We have a topic I didn't intend to speak to just because I don't really care. I'm not necessarily counting myself among the numbers of people who very rightly, I guess, and very politely and whatever, excluding themselves from the discussion of the Donald Trump Jr. divorce, which has apparently now been announced. And, a little bit of discussion of that online, then lots of scolding pushback on people saying, don't take any glee or joy in this because it's a sad personal situation. And sure, yes, that's always true. And, of course, always true for the kids, etc. However, there are mitigating circumstances. The first, of course, being, as many people pointed out, Donald Trump Jr. is a horrible person and kind of deserves it. But that wasn't enough for me. I mean, I wasn't looking for a reason. I didn't find it interesting at all, although I said, that's weird. Just because I had in my mind this picture of his wife being very pleased at having married a Trump and wanting to stay a part of the family and enjoy the benefits of that. Though, I mean, there's been threats, I'm sure, against the family. I think they got some kind of mysterious envelope at some point. Is it possible that Vanessa Trump, his wife's name, Vanessa, thought, I didn't sign up for this kind of nonsense. I got to get out of here. I want to protect my kids. That could be it. I really have no idea what's going on, and I don't care that much. But other people did point out, one, Trump Jr. something of a jerk. Two, Trump Jr. something of a habitual tweeter with glee about other celebrity divorces in the past. That's not nice. And then here's a possibility I really didn't give any thought to because I didn't give any thought to any of it. John Fugelsang. Many of you follow him, as I do, on Twitter, a actor, comedian, broadcaster, writer, and recovering cynic with a Sirius XM radio show as well, and all-around funny guy and good observer of the political scene. And he wryly puts it this way: I refuse to joke about Vanessa Trump because it's never funny when a couple files for an uncontested quick divorce, one where assets can be swiftly transferred on the same day that an independent special counsel subpoenas their family business. People, this could happen to you someday. And so I guess he recommends approaching the whole thing with caution, let's say. Yeah, that's a really good point. What if it's a divorce in name only, and the whole idea is to quickly transfer as many vulnerable assets to her as part of a so-called divorce settlement so that it's not reachable by the special counsel? I mean, there's a lot of that can be undone later on, but it causes a lot of problems and a lot of trouble. And I don't know. I have no idea whether that's what they're after. I have no insight into their relationship, and I don't want any. I just thought that was worth thinking about, just out of an abundance of caution. You should be aware that that's a possibility. I don't know what you're going to do about it over the weekend, but I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to think a lot about that and become very suspicious and cynical. That's my plan for what free time I have for the weekend. By the way, another interesting tweet that I passed on to you this morning, and if you haven't woken up and seen what I've shared with you, or you're listening via podcast, this makes sense as a recap. If you are awake and or on the East Coast, and it could be that you're asleep but on the East Coast and listening in your sleep, that could equally apply on the West Coast, but I think you're in deeper REM sleep, so you don't know it yet. Anyway, I liked this observation. Waldo Jackwith, whose name we have called in the past on the program, noting the MSNBC tweet quoting Larry Kudlow, now I guess Trump's chief economic advisor, Larry Kudlow on Trump's cabinet. He's saying, the fact that they all keep getting caught in petty corruption, look away. It doesn't mean anything. Wealthy folks, he says, have no need to steal or engage in corruption, which is a theory I've heard circulated before. And in fact, part of Trump's theory of the case for why he should be elected president. Successful businessman, he's not, whatever. But yeah, I'll be able to run the government without corruption because I don't need to be corrupt to steal a whole bunch of money from the government. I'm already corruptly stealing enough money from the private sector to satisfy my every need, except that's not true because I'm a megalomaniac and I'm a pathological liar, so that might also not be true. I don't know. It's problematic, but on the question of whether or not the wealthy need to steal, it makes some, I guess, simplistic inherent sense. But of course, I don't know, maybe the wealthy of this age are different. Maybe it's just always been true, but we were too genteel back in the olden days to acknowledge it. But I think greed and wealth very often, and you probably think so too, do go hand in hand. And there's very often plenty of people who can't be satisfied with the amount of wealth that they have. I mean, I guess witness the fact that billionaires exist, right? Isn't being a multimillionaire quite enough for most people? We all thought, for instance, that Mitt Romney, who claimed a net worth in the neighborhood of $250 million, was extraordinarily wealthy. The guy had a car elevator, he had dressage horses, he had houses all over the place. He was living a high rollers lifestyle at, I guess allegedly what is something like 1/6, 1/8 of the claimed wealth of Donald Trump, but you never see Donald Trump passing up opportunities to make more money or steal more money. So the theory was never really valid, but Waldo's observation on it was even more pointed, I thought. He put it this way: somebody with a vast collection of 17th century candlesticks is the last person who you'd need to worry about stealing your 17th century candlesticks. It's the people with no 17th century candlesticks you have to worry about. Look over there. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, money, everybody has some, or wishes they had some anyway, or everybody's after the same thing. And few and far between the people who are after additional pairs of 17th century candlesticks. But, okay, so it's a much more specific product or goal if you're just talking about the theft of it. But it makes a lot of sense, right? I think that's an interesting spin to put on all of this, and well worth sharing, because, I don't know, it's Friday and we share things like that. All right, let's see. Oh, Marianne says she's got a Boy Scout comment. Husband is a popcorn kernel. We feel your pain. Are you not all not all Boy Scouts continue to sell the popcorn in our area? I don't know, the troops we've been involved with, the popcorn kernel, the popcorn sales are a Cub Scout activity. Although they did carry it over a little bit, and a couple of the Cubs wanted to continue to sell popcorn, which I find unfathomable, but certainly entirely possible. And maybe your troop continues to sell. Lots of fundraisers done by lots of different troops and different organizations. We got some interesting ones around here too. Sell Christmas trees, that do all sorts of things. So our guys, they're big fundraisers. They sell the mulch, they distribute the mulch, they even spread the mulch for an additional fee. They come back and tear your bags of mulch apart and throw them all over your yard. They're very neat and precise about it. They're very good about it. And so Saturday is a lost day for us, and everybody in the troop and all the parents spend all day, dawn, not even to dusk, it's dawn to the late hours of the night sometimes, working on this, loading up these trucks, distributing them, carrying the bags off of the trucks. That's what the kids do during the day. The parents go with them, driving the kids around, chasing the delivery trucks. In the mulch yard, we load those pallets of those mulch bags back onto the truck, clean the trucks out every time they come back, and then we're cleaning out the parking lot of the school that we work out of. I was there till like 10 o'clock last night. 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., it's a hell of a day. Buy mulch, ladies and gentlemen. If your local scouts are approaching you about that, it doesn't even matter whether you need mulch or not. Just store it in your basement until the day comes. So one day you'll be sorry that you don't have enough mulch. Let's say, for instance, a bad guy with mulch breaks into your house. How are you going to defend yourself unless you, as a good guy or gal, are armed with mulch of your own? And I don't mean to assume your gender. I just think you should have mulch. That's all I'm saying. And we're going to move on from this topic and get to the rest of the happenings. Let's see. What else have we to add to this? Warlock has written me here, DD equals David Dennison, and that's, of course, Donald Trump's, his alias in the Stormy Daniels non-disclosure agreement. How did we get to DD, though? Did I mention something about DD? I've already forgotten what happened in the first 15 minutes of the show. All right. I'm sure we'll get back to that in a little while. Warlock will remind me what we were talking about. Many things to get to. Oh, look at this. Justice and Fact says it's World Sleep Day. Did not know that was a day, and I'm upset about that. When is a Sleep Like a Pirate Day? I'd like to do that. You put on 2 eye patches and just go to bed. It's terrific. Everyone should try it. What else have we here? All right. I think the latest, I have to check up. I've seen so many conflicting reports or previews of the next firing. Is HR Puffenstuff McMaster still National Security Advisor right now? Is he out after the end of the day Friday? Is he gone now? Or are they just assuming he's gone over the weekend? I don't know what the status is. I don't know who's supposed to be next. People are talking about John Bolton, which would be horrific. But, very possible. Apparently Trump is trying to decide who looks better on TV or looks more the part of a national security advisor, and has pretty much decided to shuffle people around. There are other personnel issues that came up in the last day or two, just by way of segueing. Let's see. We've got a couple of articles that I think are describing the same phenomenon from a slightly different angle. But a big deal in the news yesterday was House Intel Committee Democrats and House Government Oversight Democrats as well, finding out that in the State Department in particular, there was a program on which was revealed to them by the testimony of a whistleblower to essentially purge the State Department of career civil service personnel, which is really something that should not be happening. That's the whole point of having career civil service personnel, to purge them of people who are not Trump loyalists and remove them from the State Department, or somehow force them from the State Department and replace them with loyalists. This is enormously problematic and enormously familiar as well, because it's something that Republicans try to do all the time. That is to say, this was the program that was underway with respect to the Department of Justice, and I suspect several other departments as well, during the George W. Bush administration. That's what the U.S. Attorney's scandal was really all about. That's what the what was the name of the I can't now remember the players in the George W. Bush Department of Justice / U.S. Attorney's scandal, because they were trying to do this in more than just the U.S. Attorney's office within the Department of Justice. But there were several Bush loyalists who were accused of making improper inquiries into the political loyalties of people applying for ostensibly non-political and or career civil service jobs in the Department of Justice, and who were being directed, it was widely suspected by people like, and operatives like Karl Rove, to make sure that Trump loyalists were being essentially entrenched in civil service jobs from which it would be difficult to expel them later. And, there was a very hypocritical and contradictory and problematic operation, in that they knew that if they could get away with discreetly enough entrenching hardcore Bush loyalists in jobs where they were not supposed to be. In other words, if they made their politics a primary consideration for placement in jobs where politics are not supposed to be a consideration at all, and got away with it, then you would have hardcore Bush loyalists, Republican loyalists, sitting in jobs from which it would be nearly impossible for a law-abiding, rule-abiding, rule-respecting, norm-respecting, democratic successor administration to dislodge them. Democrats would want them gone because they might even know outright that they had been placed there for their political views in violation of law and in violation of all the hiring rules. But out of respect for those same hiring rules, Democrats would have difficulty expelling those people from those jobs, and they would just sit there as sleeper agents, essentially undermining the implementation of democratic policy initiatives and lying in wait for the opportunity to expedite the execution of some future Republican administration's plans. That's what they wanted out of the Department of Justice. That's what they wanted out of placing those people in the U.S. attorney's jobs, though those U.S. attorney jobs very frequently turn over with a new administration. So that isn't the way, that's not the place to embed people, but it is a way to affect the implementation of policy in a way that's not supposed to be that overtly political. But the rest of the department, and in particular civil service positions in, say, the voting rights section, where Hans van Spakovsky and what was the other guy's name? Brett something or other. Anyway, I don't know if I have the name correct. I can't remember all these villains. But they were going about the business of trying to frustrate the career attorneys out of the voting rights section and replace them with Republican loyalists who would help clear the way for pre-clearance of essentially facially discriminatory redistricting plans and gerrymandering and voting rights enforcement plans in the states under consent orders, consent decrees from way back when they segregated their voting, former Jim Crow states. So this was a plan for a long time in the Justice Department, and they had some limited success with it. Now it turns out that the same thing was underway in the State Department. And worse still, Newt Gingrich turned out to be a part of that program. Let's see. Did I have both here? I know I have somewhere the story of the whistleblower that the Democrats in the House were listening to. But I also have, let's see, where is the whistleblower story? I'll start perhaps with the story that includes Newt Gingrich in it. This one is from Politico. Emails reveal conservative alarm over Obama holdovers in the Trump administration. Now, see what's happening here and where this play is developing in the State Department. They are essentially, this is yet more projection. And you know what it puts me in mind of is actually the nuclear option thing, and I'll tell you why in a second. What they're saying here is we think we need a plan to purge people that Obama might have entrenched in the State Department to basically pull the same stunt against us that we planned to pull against him but never got around to doing before losing office to the Democrats in 2008. And like I said, that much more projection. No evidence that there was any out of the ordinary plan in the Obama administration to leave behind civil servants who were sworn Obama loyalists and who would undermine any future Republican administration. Just straight up. I mean, I'm sure there's always some personal bias in the hiring. If you have loyal Democrats and you show up and you say, what would you like to do here in the State Department? And the answer is, I would like to ethnically purge it, for instance. Well, I'm not really interested in hiring you, as opposed to I'd like to, promote some values which are easier to understand as part of a Democratic administration's plans for the State Department. That person might get hired. But because it was always their plan to embed and entrench political loyalists going forward, they, of course, suspected that the Obama administration must have been up to the same thing. And in all their planning about, making it impossible for an Obama administration to purge the government of Bush holdovers, they undoubtedly gave some thought to, well, what would we do in reverse? And now they are executing that plan. Emails reveal conservative alarm over Obama holdovers in Trump administration. A cleaning is in order. Ooh, like ethnic cleansing. Wrote a former aide to Vice President Dick Cheney. Who else would be writing something like this besides Newt? As State Department officials reassigned a career diplomat of Iranian descent. This is Nahal Tusi's article for Politico. It'll take us right up to the break and beyond. 2 months into the Trump administration, a distraught State Department Iran expert named Sahar Nowrozadeh, N-O-W-R-O-U, Nowrozadeh, two Z's. Nowrozadeh, we're going to say. Sahar Nowrozadeh asked her new boss for help. What happened here? A conservative website had published an article depicting Nowrozadeh as a Barack Obama loyalist who had, quote, burrowed into the government. Yes, that was the terminology that was in use during the Bush administration when they were looking to burrow into the government and entrench in the government. Entrenchment in the government was actually, I think, Mark Tushnet's terminology for it, and others. But burrowing into the government, a big concern for them all of a sudden because they knew that could happen because they were doing it during the George W. Bush administration. So now they were worried that Barack Obama had done the same because they project on everything. And I said I was going to relate it. Might as well do that now before the break and then save the substance of the article for afterwards. I told you that it reminded me to some extent of the nuclear option situation. And here's how. The nuclear option, of course, the name for the nuclear option, both nuclear option and the more genteel name that they gave it, the constitutional option, all came from Republican leadership in the Senate. It was Trent Lott, who of course referred to what became known as the nuclear option first as the nuclear option, and it was their leadership aides who laid out the specifics of the maneuvers in an article that they called a constitutional option. Now, of course, I have always contended that this sort of stuff was always available and had been done in the past. Yes, it had, but laying it out ahead of time and writing out the plan and saying this is what we're going to do on judges was a Republican idea. That they never got around to executing it, their own fault, and they left the plans lying around for us. And guess what? We did use it. We'll talk about it after the break. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. Wow. Oh, look at this. I'm going to have to put aside a couple of different things, breaking news. But before I get too far afield, I'll stop to double back on one thing. Oliver Willis making a relevant comment on the Don Jr. divorce question. Conservatives bank on liberals being nice guy / gal, back to the guy-gal thing for us. Nice guy, gal saps so we don't see it coming when they punch us in the face. Don't make fun of Don Jr., an adult involved up to his eyeballs in his dad's political operation, while they're going after Chelsea and Malia when they were kids. And that's true, and quite so. And I don't know what you want to do about it. But it's an observation, and I thought I would throw it out there. I was explaining just before we went into the break, the nuclear option situation. Again, they laid out these plans to change the filibuster rules such that they would be able to force their judges through in the George W. Bush administration. Never did get around to executing it. Then the plans were left lying around. Democrats picked them up and used them after a fashion, I should say. Could spend 2 hours telling you what the fashion was, but trust me. And then, of course, Republican outrage. How dare you? Total disruption of Senate norms, et cetera, et cetera. And it was, to an extent. And but it was, of course, these were your plans, and you loved them a couple of years ago. And, of course, we hated them a couple of years ago. So, there's a little bit of shoe on the other foot for everybody here, a little bit of hypocrisy for everybody, but Then again, I guess the situation is they lay this plan out. They say it's great, it's constitutional, we should do it. Democrats are terrible obstructionists. Then they don't do it. Then Democrats find themselves obstructed by Republicans who were just busy condemning obstructionism. So they pull the trigger on Republican plans that they left lying around and use it. And the Republicans, of course, go crazy. How dare you do this awful thing that we planned for you? And then immediately go back to obstructing the Supreme Court nomination that they left the filibuster in place for inexplicably, blocking the appointment of Merrick Garland, et cetera, et cetera. You know, the modern story of all this. But my point here is they laid out these plans and then either didn't execute them fully or didn't execute them at all. And then they're shocked to find out that the plans that they threatened Democrats with incessantly for years and then left lying around was used by Democrats, and they were surprised. Now, in this case, I guess the embedding of personnel in government, I mean, to some extent, it would happen even inadvertently, even if you were trying not to do something like that. And, honestly, I don't know how much effort Barack Obama or the people working for him put into either quietly embedding people or, more likely, the way Barack Obama operated, going out of his way not to be even perceived to be doing something like that because it's so awful. And it's a rotten thing to do. But once again, we unilaterally disarm on these things all the time. And I think that's likely what happened here. Once again, they were very interested in entrenching people in government when they were with George W. Bush, frightened out of their wits, if they had any, during the Barack Obama administration that we might be executing the plans they left lying around untouched again, and then seamlessly move into, oh, what a great idea this is again, once they take the White House back. You can't trust Republicans with the White House. And again, like the torture issue, like the filibuster reform issue, now like this entrenchment / burrowing in issue, there essentially are laws and norms when Democrats win the White House, and then they go out the window when Republicans win the White House. And that's all they're interested in. They have this the focus on one office. And they love the fact that they have a majority in Congress, but I don't even think they care about that because they've had it. They've had it before when Obama was president and they did nothing with it. They specifically did nothing with it. And then everybody thought, oh, well, if they capture the White House and hold on to the Congress, then it will be real danger because then there would be a Republican president in place to sign their crazy ideas. And then they realized as soon as they had that trifecta, they still couldn't pass any of their crazy ideas. So I don't think they even place a great deal of value on the majority in Congress. They focus only on the White House. I mean, to a large extent, Democratic voters, rank and file voters, focus only on the White House too. But as a party, they just think, if you win the White House, you can do whatever the hell you want. So let's just concentrate on that. Whereas Democrats say, we'd like to change laws and make policy, but then, rank and file Dems don't show up to make that happen very often in the local elections that it requires to do that. All right, back to the story, though. What happens here, once again, Sahar Nowruzadeh, working for the State Department as an Iran expert, and because she's got a wacky last name, I guess, a conservative website publishes an article depicting her as a Barack Obama loyalist who had burrowed into the government under Trump and even had ties to the hated Iranian regime itself. And you know that's true because dramatic music played. And it's never not true when that stuff happens. Focusing on her role in the negotiation of, you guessed it, Obama's 2015 nuclear deal with Tehran, the article was headlined, Iran Deal Architect is Running Tehran Policy at the State Department. Well, yeah, kind of probably true. Nowruzadeh emailed Brian Hook, the new chief of the State Department's planning policy staff, where she worked on Middle East issues, to insist that the article was, quote, filled with misinformation. She assured Hook that since joining the government under George W. Bush in 2005, that is to say under a Republican regime, she had always, quote, adapted to shifting U.S. policy priorities, as any career government staffer is expected to do. She asked for his help in correcting the record. Hook was already well aware of the story. The article, which appeared in an obscure online publication called Conservative Review. How is it that he's already well aware of something in such an obscure online publication? Well, the article had caused a stir among conservative activists and incoming Trump officials who were busy trying to establish who Nowruzadeh was and whether she could be purged. Brian Hook, in charge of this very important part of the State Department, is one of the conspiracy theorist loons that Donald Trump supporters and Donald Trump's operation attracts, because Donald Trump is a conspiracy theory loon, and everybody flocked to the government to work for the conspiracy theory loon in chief. They thought finally their day had arrived. That's how you become aware of these obscure things. According to emails obtained by Politico, the agitators included former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, who's supposed to know better, but really doesn't, who sent the article to Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's chief of staff. Rex Tillerson, of course, since been fired. And a Trump official who told top Tillerson aides that Nowruzadeh was, quote, born in Iran. She was not, like Kenya. And that she had wept after Trump's election, which, of course, could be true, but we don't know. But lots of people wept after Trump's election. Maybe it was the fact that she was female that pushed her to weep after Trump's election. Or a sane person. That's also a possibility. The emails show that the State Department and White House officials repeatedly shared such misleading information about Nowruzadeh, deriding her as an Obama cheerleader and a strong advocate for the nuclear deal with Iran, which Trump had repeatedly denounced. Later, after Nowruzadeh was reassigned to another job, some State Department officials tried to mislead a Politico reporter about whether she'd completed her full tenure in Hook's policy shop. The exchanges provide a window into the intense suspicion, critics call it paranoia, it is, of senior Trump officials toward the employees they inherited upon taking over the government, especially in the realms of foreign policy and national security. In one email, a staffer was described as, quote, a leaker and a troublemaker, while another was branded a turncoat, although career staffers generally observe an ethos of nonpartisanship. Many Trump officials saw them as constituting a, quote, deep state cabal determined to sabotage the new president's agenda. The emails also suggest that Nowruzadeh may have been targeted in part because of her ethnicity, which would be a violation of federal employment law, and, of course, all that is right and good in the world. But never mind any of that. The emails were the subject of a Thursday letter to the White House and State Department from Representatives Elijah Cummings and Elliot Engel, the top Dems on the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform and the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, respectively. The letter calls the emails provided to Congress by an unnamed whistleblower extremely disturbing and demands further documents from the Trump administration. In the early months of Trump's presidency, conservative media organizations such as Breitbart News and the Conservative Review published several stories singling out career civil and foreign service staffers by name. The reports often called such employees, quote, Obama holdovers, even though many, like Nowruzadeh, joined the government well before Obama took office and urged their firing. The stories were terrifying to career employees who, in some cases, had spent decades working out of the spotlight. Nowruzadeh, who would not comment for this article, told Hook that she feared for her safety. And in the epoch of Pizzagate, she's probably quite right. Any suggestion that the makeup of the policy planning staff reflects a bias against career civil servants is completely without merit, State Department spokesman Heather Nauert told Politico. Nauert said that more than half of the office's current staff members are career professionals from the foreign and civil service and the military. That's always true, right? The details of policy planning's staffing under Director Hook demonstrate that career civil servants continue to play an integral role, as do political appointees. She added, there are currently 14 career professionals on the policy planning staff, 2 from the Foreign Service, 9 from the Civil Service, and 3 from the military. A Connecticut-born U.S. citizen of Iranian descent, Naruzada, 35, joined the Civil Service in 2005 during Bush's second term. She went on to, now remember what's going on here, Bush's second term, 2005, we are fighting in Afghanistan. We are fighting in Iraq. We're fighting a global war on terror. We've got an axis of evil that includes North Korea, with whom Donald Trump can't wait to sit down and meet, Iran, with which Barack Obama eventually works out a de-escalation of nuclearization, I guess you could call it, deal. And who the hell was even the other participant in the axis of evil? I can't even remember. Was it 3 of them? Was it more than that? It's so long ago. Why don't I ask David Frum on Twitter, and then maybe he can clarify that. Let's see. I'll a quick check, just make sure I've got my players right here. Was it, let's see, here, look at this. Axis of Evil has a Wikipedia entry. And it's color coordinated. So Iran, I guess Iraq is kind of in there before we overturned the government there. Iraq, Iran, North Korea. And I guess there's like a yellow spot here. And what is that, Libya, it looks like? I don't know whether that was, he's like the Pete Best, I guess, of the Axis of Evil. Okay, well, at any rate, that's the context in which all of this is happening, right? And we are, at that point, scrambling for Farsi speakers to join the military or the NSA. We're looking for people who are experts in understanding the cultures so that we can decipher what's going on and comb over intelligence and prevent another 9/11 style attack from happening. And up steps a U.S.-born, a Connecticut-born even, U.S. citizen of Iranian descent to help with this, joining the George W. Bush administration as a proof, I guess, I don't know whether this was explicitly in her mind, but as a proof of her loyalty to her country. American-born, parents, I guess, of Iranian descent, or she's of Iranian descent, so I guess they were probably Iranian-born. But, I mean, what else could you ask of somebody? Of course, a few years later, the same party, the Republican Party, ostensibly the same party, now out to purge that person because that person had stepped up to serve her country and prove her loyalty and lend her familiarity and understanding with Iranian culture to any administration elected to serve this country, whether Republican or Democrat. But then we got the Trump one, and they said, no, you once worked for a Democrat. Though you joined the government under a Republican, you continued to work under a Democrat. That makes you a disloyal American, in our view, because we're Trumpers and we're crazy. That's where we are in all this. So, Connecticut-born U.S. citizen of Iranian descent. She joins the civil service in 2005. She went on to join Obama's National Security Council staff, where she worked on the negotiation and implementation of the Iran nuclear deal because she understood Iran. Former Obama officials described Naruzada as a seasoned Iran expert who gave them valuable insights into the country's dynamics and motivations. By the time Trump took office in January of 2017, Naruzada was on a year-long detail to the State Department's policy planning staff, a kind of in-house think tank for the Secretary of State, provided he or she is interested in thinking, I guess, where she focused on Iran and the Gulf Arab states. Hook, a former George W. Bush administration official, who should know better, presumably, generally considered a moderate, had been tapped to run the office by Tillerson. Naruzada attracted the attention of conservative media outlets during the Obama years after her name, spooky, which indicated her Iranian ethnicity, appeared on a public White House document. Conservative reports questioned her national loyalties, though she was American-born, and fixated on the fact that she had interned with the National Iranian-American Council, an advocacy group that strongly supported the nuclear deal and generally favors better U.S.-Iranian relations. Scratch out Iran, put in Russia, and what's the problem? Everybody wants better U.S.-Russian relations, right? The Conservative Review article described NIAC as, quote, an alleged Iranian regime lobbying group. The NIAC denies such ties, and it had regular contact with the Obama White House. Nowruzadeh interned for the group as a college student at a time when it did not take positions on U.S. policy. But other than that, she's obviously a spy. The story of Nowruzadeh that ran in the Conservative Review on March 14th, 2017, about a year ago, covered much of that same territory, saying she had, quote, burrowed into the government under President Trump and had helped craft, quote, false narratives on the Iran deal to sell to the American public while working for Obama. It touched off a flurry of activity in conservative circles. Barbara Ladine, a prominent conservative activist, and by the way, Ladine sounds suspiciously foreign, I might say. A prominent conservative activist forwarded the story with an UGG in the subject line to a Google group apparently focused on judicial strategy. David Wormser, good name, a former Middle East advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney, forwarded the Conservative Review story to Gingrich and wrote to the State Department, a cleaning is in order there. Ethnic cleaning. Gingrich, in turn, flagged the article by email to Tillerson's Chief of Staff, Margaret Peterlin. Peterlin? No idea. Some emails suggest the conservative outlets were interested in more than publishing provocative stories. Joel B. Pollack, a top staffer at Breitbart News, emailed Tillerson aide Matt Mowers with an offer to supply, quote, additional background on Obama holdovers. The same day that the story about Nowruzadeh was published, White House and State Department officials were busy exchanging emails about Nowruzadeh. In one of them, Julia Haller, whose LinkedIn profile lists her as being a White House liaison to the State Department at the time, incorrectly claimed that Nowruzadeh, quote, was born in Iran. Because why not claim that, right? Adding, upon my understanding, she cried when the president won. This initial info is helpful, Hook replied after that response, along with background on Nowruzadeh's employment status, was relayed to him. Hook said he had, quote, emailed friends who tracked the Iran deal for intel on her, unquote. Now, by the way, where would the information that she cried have come from? And who cares? I mean, the president himself just spent the other day telling everybody, I made up everything when I talked to Justin Trudeau. And by the way, as it turns out, he made up the meeting at which he talked to Trudeau as well. Perhaps we'll be able to shoehorn that in today's show. All right. So, Hook, who many state employees have described as highly suspicious of the career diplomats around him, also asked his deputy director of the policy planning staff, Edward Lacey, about Nowruzadeh. Himself a career official, Lacey used the opportunity to advocate for a house cleaning. Amazing. Noting that several people on the policy planning staff were appointed by Hook's Obama-era predecessors. Their picks, without exception, were Obama and Clinton loyalists not at all supportive of President Trump's foreign policy agenda, Lacey wrote, adding that all of these detailees have tried to stay on in policy planning. Ed, this is helpful. Let's discuss on Monday, Hook replied. In a later email, Lacey told Hook that Nowruzadeh had, quote, helped promote and defend the Iran deal. I would say with enthusiasm. In other words, she did her job. With enthusiasm. Oh no, not that. In her March 15th email to Hook, Nowruzadeh tried to set the record straight, calling the Conservative Review story unfortunate and full of wrong information. She's so gentle about it. By way of brief background, I am and have been a career civil servant for nearly 12 years now, she wrote. I've adapted my work to the policy priorities of every administration I've worked for. She adds that she has physical and online safety concerns and asks for Hook's help in correcting the record. Hook's response, if there was one, is not included in the material obtained by Politico. In April, Hook pushed Nowruzadeh out of his policy planning staff, cutting her year-long detail short by 3 months. She was returned to the State Department Near East Bureau, or NEA, where she was an official permanent employee. When Politico began asking questions about her sudden reassignment that month, some State Department officials wanted to offer misleading statements about what had happened to Narozadeh. In a series of emails on April 17th, Lacey urged State Department public affairs officials to tell Politico that Narozadeh had left policy planning, quote, on the completion of that assignment, unquote. A public affairs official, Justin Reynolds, tried to counter that, saying his unit, quote, would like to avoid commenting on where she is now and how long details normally last, if at all possible, unquote. Of course, this email chain, for whatever reason, exhibiting an extraordinarily guilty mind here, they couldn't just say, we pushed her out, because they were aware that that was problematic and possibly illegal. So they're looking around already for ways to not get caught doing what they just did. But Lacey insisted, we need to counter the notion that she has been forced out of SP, a common term for policy planning. Her return to NEA should be characterized as what it is, the normal return to a parent office of a civil servant at the completion of a detail assignment, a perfectly normal occurrence. Narozadeh, who was copied on the exchange, fought back. Ed, my assignment was not completed, she wrote. The 3-month curtailment due to the duration of my detail was also not handled in accordance with what was explicitly stated in my Memorandum of Understanding. At one point, Narozadeh asks Reynolds, can we try to kill this story? U.S. law is generally supposed to protect career government employees from politically motivated firings and other retaliation not linked to their work performance. But political appointees of incoming administrations have a lot of latitude, and they have to, because you can never tell what people are doing, when it comes to assigning people or promoting them. That means it's possible to shuffle people around without necessarily violating any laws. Narozadeh remains a State Department employee, though she's now on a fellowship at Harvard University. Not too bad, right? She was just one of many people viewed with suspicion by Trump administration officials. An email Hook sent to himself on April 25th included a list of names with questions about their loyalties. Does that sound ominous to you? Including the charges that one was a leaker and troublemaker and the other a turncoat. Remember that? The email's subject line was Derek Notes. The reference was to Derek Harvey, who was at the time a senior official in the National Security Council, according to a congressional aide who deals with State Department oversight. Harvey was worried about several career staffers he deemed insufficiently loyal to Trump and was behind efforts to sideline them, the aide said. Now, keep in mind here, before we even get... Oh, you know what? I'll conclude the article. There's 2 more lines. I'll see if I can remember this note until later. In a brief interview, Harvey insisted he'd not removed anyone from their position early and only had concerns about 2 or 3 people who'd acted in a disruptive manner toward his deputies. But even those were not removed early, he said. Politico's story about Narozadeh's ouster from the policy planning staff was published on April 21st, 2017. Hook emailed the story out to R.C. Hammond, at that time a communications aide to Tillerson. The story, Hook said, was ludicrous. The whole thing is ludicrous. And now, of course, we find out, oh, it was actually all true, not ludicrous, as you said. How fascinating is that? Now, one thing I was going to note for you just moments ago, to keep in mind in all of this, is very often, say, someone like Derek Harvey here would see an opportunity in a change of administrations, no matter who's coming in and who's going out, to use this sort of thing. Like, basically, if you have, for instance, butted heads with Narozadeh or anybody else, you probably have, a lot of these civil service employees have a S list of people they don't like, essentially, for whatever reason. Either they've stepped on their plans in the past, refused to cooperate, or they suspect they're from the other political party, whatever it is, even though that's not supposed to be an issue. And very often, particularly if they are in a position to get a promotion, or if they find themselves in political sync with an incoming administration and their prospects are looking up, right? Either to move into a political position in the hierarchy or to move up in the civil service, whatever it is, not an uncommon occurrence to supply a list of names with vague hints about their troublemaking capacity or their insufficient loyalty to the new administration or their disruptiveness or what have you, so that they're bounced out of your way if they're in line to succeed to a higher office that you want for yourself. You can bump them off this way. We see it in a lot of different contexts. We see it, for instance, in the supplying of intelligence on the street in Iraq after our invasion, where people would turn their neighbors in. I used to fight with that guy over him throwing his trash in the alleyway. He's Al-Qaeda. Round him up. And we would round him up and torture him. And neighbor is satisfied, and we're happy too because we're torturing people, and we love that, apparently. So a lot of that is probably what's going on here too. Derek Harvey has a hit list with an S in front of it that he wants to get rid of, and so he just turns them in as insufficiently loyal to Trump and at least bumps them out of consideration for a job that he's also competing for. I think there's always a lot of that going on. But amazing how much trouble that can cause, especially when it ends up in the newspaper. Wow. So that's a pretty disturbing look at what's going on in the State Department and probably several other departments. Doesn't sound like Newt Gingrich was in it up to his eyeballs, but of course he's looking to keep a finger in the pie and naturally finds a way to step in a giant steaming pile of crap along the way because he's a bumbling idiot at heart, and everyone should probably keep that in mind about him. All right, we're about 30 seconds away. Here comes our music, as a matter of fact, from taking our short 1-minute break. A good time to recoup and decide what to do with this second hour of our show. So many stories, lots of quick hits we could do, but so many in-depth stories that we really need to get to as well. So we'll make some quick decisions during the 1-minute break and prepare for the upcoming weekend of wackiness. Phew! We'll be back right after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show, right here on Netroots Radio. 1 minute, not nearly enough time to track down all the stories that we're considering and make the decisions necessary to guide us to a coherent second half of the show. So we'll just go with the same old incoherent approach that has served us so well to date. Let's first flip over to Twitter and see if there are comments about which we need to catch up on. Let's see. What have we here? Chief Beef Loco referring to the axis of Knievel, which is always fun. Let's see. Warlock, what's your question here? If Trump is so bad, why is Virginia a purple state? I don't know exactly what that's supposed to mean. Do you mean it should be blue? Or what? I don't really know exactly what that is supposed to mean, but Virginia is a purple state because it's got a sizable contingent of deplorables, to be honest. Plus, of course, career mainstream Republicans who are entrenched in the Northern Virginia area, who mitigate its blueness, even up north, where everything is otherwise Democratic leaning. Largely also because of the large government employee contingent. People just tend to be center-left, essentially, although, they sometimes describe themselves as center-right in order to survive in government. If you're actually center-left and a center-left government is in place, you have to tell everybody that you're actually center-right because the center-left government is concerned about being seen as too left. So if all of its employees that embody the Washington consensus on almost everything, whatever their policy area is, say instead that they consider themselves moderate to center-right, that's supposed to deflect criticism. Whereas when a right-wing administration is in place, you also have to describe yourself as right-wing, otherwise they'll purge you. So if you're serving under a Republican president, you got to say you're right-leaning, or the right-leaning activists will try and see you purged. If you are serving under a left-leaning administration, you need to say once again that you are right-leaning so that right-leaning activists don't complain, not to the president, because that won't help them, but to the newspapers, and frighten the presidents who are worried about looking too left-leaning, that they need to purge you themselves. So the Washington consensus really is you got to pretend to be right-leaning no matter who you serve under and whether or not it's true. Let's see. Another question here. Alberto Gonzalez name came up. Yes, Dave Gilligan asking, was Alberto and Gonzalez involved in the Attorney General scandal? Yes, of course. That is true. That's the one I was talking about, and that was the question. Was that what we were referring to? Yes, it is. Okay. So let's see. Scanning through my pocket list here. And we'll try and do a couple of quick hits on our way to finding. What I'm looking for is, where did I put the story that I needed an hour or so to discuss about Felix Sater? Because he's back in the news, and we didn't discuss it when he cropped up last week. And I think it's going to be a big weekend and week coming up afterwards for Felix Sater and Felix Sater stories. Now, we know who he is. There is a counter narrative now out there being pushed, and I want to evaluate it. And I thought I might do that on the air with you. Let's see. But before we get to that, quick hit. In the Only Hire the Best People files, another Trump administration person who turns out to be a scumbag of one kind or another. This time, The Hill reporting, HUD advisor resigned after questions about fraud and exaggerated biography. According to a report, Rebecca Savransky has written this piece. An advisor at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, has resigned after questions were raised about allegations of fraud and his biography, The Guardian reported on Thursday. The advisor, Naved Jaffrey, resigned from his role after The Guardian raised questions about him, including about his several allegations of fraud. Jaffrey admitted to exaggerating his military record. That seems to be a favorite subject for Trumpkins, according to The Guardian, and said he chose to resign because the questions raised by the publication had hurt his reputation at the department. And everyone knows how seriously they take reputation at HUD. You and I both know we live in a world of opinion and facts merging together, he told the news outlet. Jaffrey's exact role at HUD, as well as how he came to work there, was not clear. Why is that never clear with these guys? He told the publication he was responsible for working on micro-cities. And since nobody knew what the hell that was, it was not clear why he worked there. And also initially said he had been hired to work on the department's programs to reduce the number of individuals who rely on public housing. Sure, safe enough sounding. Later, however, he told the news outlet that he had not worked on that program, without explaining further. Okay. HUD would not confirm to The Guardian Jaffrey's role at the department. The department told The Guardian it had hired Jaffrey through a contractor, but when the news outlet contacted that company, it denied HUD's statement. This does not sound good. Among the issues linked to Jaffrey's resignation is a legal case involving a fuel company that he chaired, which was ordered in 2013 to repay more than $800,000 to the family of a former NFL player and investor. The widow of Alfred Oglesby, the former NFL player who died in 2009, accused Jaffrey of fraud, and Jaffrey did not repay the money, according to The Guardian. Jaffrey has denied the allegations. And so the next logical step after being involved in a possibly fraudulent fuel company is working on micro-cities at HUD. Whatever, man. Anyway, there's this quote here. If he is advising Donald Trump, I guess Jaffrey, we're screwed. We should just surrender to North Korea right now, David Friedman, an attorney for Oglesby's family, told the news outlet. Now, why we would surrender to North Korea because of a weirdo working at HUD, I don't know. But let's see. Jaffrey was accused of fraud by owners of gas stations he tried to buy, according to The Guardian. He also misrepresented himself on parts of his personal website and exaggerated the extent of his military experience. His resignation comes after reports that HUD Secretary Ben Carson and his wife, they're just referencing the $31,000 furniture set just to take a further swing at Carson and his wife. I don't mind. Go ahead and take that swing. Anyway, that was just that quick hit. Another quick hit that we will put out there. I am sure there's writing which now follows this up, but I noted Sam Stein's tweet of last night. Michael Avenatti, Stormy Daniels' lawyer, has confirmed to me, Sam tweeted last night, that, quote, 6 separate women with similar claims to my client, that is, that they had a sexual relationship and I guess were then forced to be silent about it by a non-disclosure letter, maybe also negotiated by Michael Cohen. Let's see. 6 other such women have approached him, 2 of whom have NDAs. He and the firm are still investigating their claims. I should probably, at this point, check in on Sam's Twitter feed to see whether he has a follow-up article on that. Let's see. Sam here 3 hours ago retweeting Joe Scarborough's tweet, which says, breaking, Michael Avenatti tells Morning Mika that his client, Stormy Daniels, was physically threatened to remain quiet about her relationship with Donald Trump. That would be a new twist. But no links in his Twitter feed to any written follow-up, just that, or linkable follow-up, just that indication in his Twitter feed that Michael Avenatti has heard from 6 other women. There's a lot of them out there, I believe. All right, let's see. Other stories that we definitely want to share with you. Oh, you know what? We better bring you up to date on this one, too. Before you get too far out ahead of yourself, as I might have done if I had had time to get to this story, ProPublica issuing a rather startling correction on the story of Gina Haspel. Correction, Trump's pick to head CIA did not oversee waterboarding of Abu Zubaydah. ProPublica erred, it said, when it reported in 2017 that Gina Haspel was in charge of a secret prison in Thailand during the infamous interrogation of an al-Qaeda suspect. Raymond Bonner writing this one for ProPublica. You may have heard that. I thought I heard that news sort of in passing. I didn't pay enough attention to what people were saying about Gina Haspel in the last couple of days, and maybe it's a good thing that I didn't. This sounds like a pretty major reversal, although I think it still seems clear that she had some significant role in torture policy. This is going to go a long way towards muddying the waters. On February 22nd, 2017, ProPublica published a story that inaccurately described Gina Haspel's role in the treatment of Abu Zubaydah. It's Zubaydah is how we're spelling it today. Abu Zubaydah, a suspected al-Qaeda leader who was imprisoned by the CIA at a secret black site in Thailand in 2002. The story said that Haspel, a career CIA officer, who President Trump has nominated to be the next director of CIA, oversaw the clandestine base where Zubaydah was subjected to waterboarding and other coercive interrogation methods that are widely seen as torture. That's how they put it. The story also said she mocked the prisoner's suffering in a private conversation, which is also bad, but okay. Neither of these assertions is correct, and we retract them. It is now clear that Haspel did not take charge of the base until after the interrogation of Zubaydah ended. Now, she may have been involved in other atrocities afterwards, but this is a pretty major piece of the puzzle. And if you were planning on berating someone this weekend over their overlooking Gina Haspel's role in the torture of Abu Zubaydah, you are hereby advised that you might want to sit down with this article and see if we can get that story straight before that discussion comes up. Let's see. Other interesting things I did mention to you. Raw Story writing up this one. I'm sure someone else has followed up as well. Since then, Trump apparently made up the meeting where he lied to Canada's Trudeau. Not only did he make up the facts and figures that he used to argue with Trudeau, he may have made up the fact that there ever was such a meeting or ever was such an argument. Wow, that's pretty weird. Elizabeth Preza writing this one for Raw Story. When Donald Trump bragged to donors about making up facts during a meeting with Justin Trudeau, he apparently was making up the meeting he supposedly had with the Canadian Prime Minister. Canadian press correspondent Alexander Panetta reports. Trump on Wednesday delivered a speech at a fundraiser in Missouri where he heaped praise on himself and boasted about lying to Trudeau during a meeting on trade. According to audio obtained by the Washington Post, Trump, per his own account of the meeting with Trudeau, insisted the United States runs a trade deficit with Canada, but in fact, we run a trade surplus with them. You know the story. Anyway, as Panetta reports, the Canadians are unsure what meeting Trump's referring to. Officials suggested to the Canadian reporter that the president could have described a blend of different chats, but noted the anecdote from Trump most resembles a chat they may have had by phone, which would not have included sending officials out of a room to go look that stuff up for them. Remember that whole part of the exchange? So just, again, like, be aware that this guy is a psychopath and an idiot, and it's like, please, enough already with these guys. And can we just acknowledge that the man is mentally ill, unstable, and unfit for the presidency? I know we can't. You and I can, but the rest of the government apparently cannot bring themselves to do that. Okay, let's see. Definitely a couple of other very interesting things, some of which we're going to have to skip past. But where did we leave off? With I'm looking for this Felix Sater article, and I know it's in here, and so much has happened every day, and I've marked so many things that I haven't gotten to. Oh, look, here's something that I didn't get to in the past couple of days. We'll do quick hits on this one too. One, what is James O'Keefe up to now? The quick answer, as provided in a Gizmodo article, is that apparently James O'Keefe is mad at Twitter for banning so many conservative activists and probably other social media platforms as well. And so he figures the way to fix that is he's, taken his usual merry band of undercover, whatever you want to call them, and he's hired a couple of women to catfish as many software engineers who work for Twitter and other social media platforms as possible, pretend to go out on dates with them and secretly record them in case they make any damaging admissions about things they do at work and how their algorithms work and how they make decisions about banning conservatives. So that's the level we're on now. They hire women to pretend to have interest in, otherwise essentially innocent software engineers or security engineers who work at these places. Maybe they're guilty of something for all I know, but particularly egregious, I think, to send women out there to date these guys and try and coax information out of them. And so far he's gotten nothing. He's just, basically operating as a terrorist out there and unmonitored and undeterred, because no one has ever been able to, keep this kid in jail for long enough to get him to stop doing this kind of stuff. Just wanted you to be aware of that one. I'll pass on the Gizmodo article that has further details, but we got to do things as lightning to catch you up here. Another quick hit here. New information on Kellyanne Conway's flights on, ready? Private jets. And it's the same private jets. It's not a new breaking story of yet another Trump idiot taking private jets everywhere. It's a new breaking story of who else was on board the private jets along with Tom Price, who, of course, was drummed out of government and has been forced to repay the money he purloined from the Treasury in order to live his high-rolling lifestyle briefly. She went on the same flights. And apparently nobody talked about it, and she's still in government, and she hasn't had to pay squat. So that's the story. Also out of the House Government Oversight Committee, and I've got here a Medium post on it. Representative Elijah Cummings, the ranking member of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, sent a letter asking Chairman Trey Gowdy, he's still there, to issue a subpoena for documents from the White House that the White House has been withholding for months in response to the committee's bipartisan investigation into troubling reports that senior White House and cabinet officials, including counselor to the president Kellyanne Conway, were squandering tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars by traveling around the country on private jets. By the way, I also did see in passing somewhere along the line that Ryan Zinke now denies that those reports about him are true because he flew on propeller aircraft, not jets. You got it all wrong. Oh, well, I was interested in the thousands of dollars and private flights. Is that still true? The point is, no jets. All right, well, Kellyanne Conway now mixed up in that too. Couldn't have happened to a more horrific, awful person. But if you can find a more horrific and awful person, I hope it happens to them too. All right, let's see. Other information developed. We still have to catch up on more about Elliot Broidy, but I don't think we're going to get to him today. But that's a name you should keep in mind and consider yourselves tipped on as the weekend comes too. But I think Felix Sater probably due for more coverage. But I don't know. This is coming from a guy who didn't do particularly well in the first day of the NCAA brackets either. So I might be making the wrong upset picks here. Let's see. Oh, yes, I didn't mention this one, and this is a particularly egregious one. I bet I'll never get to Felix Sater, too, because of all the stupid, egregious little stories that I have to get to. Trump has issued another pardon. I forgot to talk about this one, and he did this last weekend. Trump's latest pardon shows the best way to get one. Go on Fox News. We've been worried about this for a long time, and we've seen evidence that policy is being driven by Fox and Friends and Fox News, whatever Trump sees on telly in the morning. And now more hard proof of it. Ryan Riley reporting for the HuffPost on this one. A former Navy sailor who pleaded guilty to a felony count of unauthorized possession and retention of national defense information. Why? Because he was snapping photos. That's not such a bad thing. On a nuclear attack submarine. Whoa, that is bad. Anyway, don't worry about it because he's received a pardon from President Donald Trump. Essentially, the guy's in jail on what amounts to nearly to espionage charges. No charges, I don't think. There's no charge that he provided that information, provided those photos directly to some foreign power or foreign agent. But the fact that he was taking those pictures was suspect. It is against the rules. You don't take selfies on board nuclear submarines for really, I think, pretty obvious reasons. But he was a dope and he did it. He didn't think through what was going on. They caught him. He said, well, I did do that. I'll plead guilty to it. Now, how does he get out of it? The legal team for Christian with a K, Christian Saucier, which I don't know whether he says saucier. He's a saucier guy than anybody else because of that K. If he was CH Christian, that's not that saucy. But with a K, he's saucier. Christian Saucier. That's really it. Anyway, he compared, the legal team for him, compared his case to the handling of the investigation into former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's use of private email servers. Why? Because that would get them on Fox News. There's no comparison. But that grabbed Trump's interest, and now it's paid off in the form of a presidential pardon announced last Friday. Last week, Saucier appeared on Fox and Friends, a program that the president records and watches during his morning, quote, executive time. Tele. Trump frequently sends tweets that correspond with segments on the morning show, as you know, and they embed some examples of them here in the article. Ronald Daigle, D-I-G-L-E, a lawyer hired to advocate for Saucier's pardon, told HuffPost that Fox News played a key role in getting the case on Trump's radar, because Trump doesn't read anything from the pardon attorney. Why would you do that? They didn't even ask the pardon attorney, apparently, in all of this. Absolutely, Daigle said when asked whether going on Fox News was a big part of their strategy. They were big supporters of Chris right from the beginning. They supported Chris. The real genius of this, of course, was comparing it to Hillary Clinton. It's a terrible comparison, but that's the hook that got him onto the show. She should be locked up, and he is locked up. That's not fair. Therefore, it sounded like an equivalent story to them. In 2016, shortly after then FBI Director James Comey announced the results of the Clinton email investigation, Saucier's legal team began comparing the submariners. I don't know if they call them submariners or not. Anyway, to his case, to Clinton's. It probably is submariner, and it really should just be submariner because we say submarine. But okay. The Justice Department responded that Saucier was, quote, grasping at highly imaginative and speculative straws. But the case got Trump's attention on telly. Saucier was sentenced to a year behind bars prior to the 2016 election, a sentence he completed before his pardon. So why bother? Because he could get away with it. Pardon. You would rather have a pardon on your record, right? One reason that federal prosecutors likely handled the case the way they did, Saucier destroyed a laptop, a camera, and the camera's memory card shortly after he was interviewed by the FBI. Pieces of a laptop were later found in the woods near a Saucier family home. Prosecutors tend to treat suspects more harshly when they are accused of destroying evidence. Since the election, Saucier's team has, quote, sent tons of marketing materials to the White House and distributed press releases in an effort to capture the president's opinion, Daigle said. Saucier's team was aiming for a political pardon rather than a pardon that goes through the normal process of the Justice Department's Office of the Pardon Attorney, Daigle said. Saucier was not yet eligible to go through that lengthy procedure. So, there's the pardon, and it's signed and all of that stuff embedded here in the article, although it does say Office of the Pardon Attorney is the credit on this one. They were just basically handed one that they didn't work on. I flipped the process around, Daigle said. We were doing something to try to capture the attention of the president, because you can go on telly and get it. When we put the pardon in, we did a press release for that. When we heard back from the pardon office, we put a press release for that. Every step of the way, we were trying to do what we can to be on the radar, and hopefully the president will hear us. We think he heard us more than once. Daigle believes that Trump simply ordered that a pardon be prepared for his signature and that the Justice Department had very little involvement. The Justice Department spokesman declined to comment. Daigle's pardon strategy isn't going to work for defendants across the board, he said. It's not going to happen in every case. It just happened because we had a set of circumstances that were truly unjust, he says, referring to his argument that the client was prosecuted where others who committed similar offenses weren't. I don't know that it's really a similar offense, though, for the Secretary of State, a non-military position, who didn't reveal any, or really, I guess their argument is, well, he didn't reveal the information either. He put it in danger of being revealed, but that's what she did. But, she was acting in an official capacity on behalf of the government, and he wasn't, for one thing. She was Secretary of State and dealing with civilian matters. He, an enlisted man in the military. It's different. But okay, that's what we have. This would make a huge difference to his family if he can get his benefits back, he said. That's what part of what they were after with the pardon. This is a very talented young man, and he couldn't find a job coming out for anything, only as a garbage collector. And now he'll be able to go after those licenses and stuff and have a nice career on the outside. All because of the vast power of telly. The president is a moron. And I'm not even saying that this guy didn't necessarily deserve the pardon. I'm just objecting to the process, as we all should. Okay, let's see. Still moving down the list here and looking for my Felix Sater article. And I just this is how much, to give you an idea, I'm giving you maybe one out of every 10 or 15 stories that I'm skipping over on my way down to the Sater article. That's how much little bits of news we have missed along the way. Let's see. Where else? What else do we need to scan through in order to get there? It's almost our next break. So maybe this break will give us a chance to find this Felix Sater article. And of course, oh yes, there's a Christopher Steele story that we had to skip along the way as well. There's just so much. Oh, and a nice article that I missed about the NRA as well. Boy, there's just so much going on here. All right. Well, as I scroll on down here, now I'm starting to get concerned about where did this Felix Sater story go to? Did I accidentally put it in the archives rather than in my current stories collection? I can't believe there was this much information in between. So I may have to, as a matter of fact, spend the break looking this thing up anew. How annoying is that? But yeah, let's see. Well, there was That's rather surprising. Okay, so that sounds rather unprofessional, and we're just going to have to let that slide for the moment. And in a few seconds, we'll be into the music, and we can pretend everything is back to normal here. Let's see. I remember the article and the writer of the piece, so I think maybe we can put together our trail that way. And see if we can't get that back on track after our next break. Still having difficulty finding this thing, but I will dig it up for you and give you that pushback and counterspin on what the hell is up with Felix Sater, and is he a Russian spy or just a mobster or something different after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show for our final segment of the day. Finally dug up the Felix Sater story that I wanted to bring to your attention, and it has since been chewed up and digested by several others, and I'm wondering whether the best approach is the short recaps of the story, the subsequent digestions of it, or to try and get as much of the original in as possible, and maybe, some mix of that. Let's first at least acknowledge where this is all coming from. BuzzFeed News, much in the news these days, published the piece that I originally set aside under the bylines of Anthony Cormier and Jason Leopold. The Asset is the name of the piece, and it is introduced by I don't know what this is. Up at the top here, The Asset has got some, I guess they are running the text maybe of his testimony somewhere, maybe to one of the investigating committees in the Congress, and he's just sort of giving his background up here, but then it cuts off. Here's the deal. I guess what we'll call the subheader to the title of The Asset reads thusly: how a player in the Trump-Russia scandal, we know him to be that from our past discussions, right? How a player in the Trump-Russia scandal led a double life as an American spy. Felix Sater has been cast as a Russian mafioso, he has, a career criminal, he has also been cast that way, and a key business associate, but also a key witness, a key business associate of President Donald Trump. But he spent more than 2 decades as an intelligence asset who helped the U.S. government track terrorists and mobsters. Greed is my go-to weapon. That is offered up as a quote from him out of context. And then finally the article, which is very long, not extraordinarily long, but it's too long for us to probably get all the way through and comment on along the way. And we have seen him characterized as a Russian mafioso. We have seen him characterized as a career criminal. We have seen him characterized as a key business associate of Donald Trump. But along the way, we have also mentioned that one of the reasons he has managed, or it's suspected he's managed to stay out of jail despite being cast as a Russian mafioso and career criminal, and he's been in jail, in and out. But the reason he's said not to be in jail now is that he's been it was hinted along the way that he was a valuable intelligence asset, and that he was supplying information to intelligence community here in the United States and the FBI, and that he was therefore sort of left hanging out there, even though they knew that a lot of his preferred activity was criminal in nature. They never did round him up because he was providing them with information that they needed on something. Well, the original reporting on it is all here in the BuzzFeed News. Let's give at least the lead and give you some idea of what they're talking about before we jump off and capture the rest of the article through subsequent writing on it. In the sprawling Trump-Russia investigation, and it is sprawling, one name constantly pops up. You know it, Felix Sater. I had the you know it. In story after story, Sater is described as Donald Trump's former business partner, a convicted stock swindler who was born in the Soviet Union, worked in Russia, tried to win Trump a deal in Moscow, and even helped broker a Ukrainian peace deal that Vladimir Putin would have loved. Basically, he's portrayed as something just short of a Russian spy. Effectively, he has been a spy, but these guys put it this way, for the United States. For the first time, BuzzFeed News has verified the surprising sweep of Sater's undercover work and many of his specific exploits. He worked as an asset for the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency, which, by the way, was the home agency at one point of notorious spy Mike Flynn, but whatever. And he tracked Osama bin Laden. You'd think that's got to be generally a good thing, right? Then he worked for more than a decade for the FBI, providing intel on everything from the mob to North Korea's drive for nuclear weapons, which gives you some sense of how interrelated those lines of work can actually be, if he's telling the truth. He still operates as a source for the Bureau, according to 2 current FBI agents, probably from the highly corrupted New York office, but okay. He did some of this work to fend off prison time after he admitted guilt in a stock scam, but he had started helping the U.S. government before then, and he continued to report back to the FBI after the agreement ended. Today, as he is being questioned about Trump's business deals and ties to Russia, he has built relationships with at least 6 members of the special counsel's team, some going back more than 10 years. And I guess I'll point out this weird parallel to one of our first stories. You could very easily, I suppose, if you were interested in spinning it this way, describe Felix Sater as someone, he was not born in the United States, he was born in the Soviet Union, which comes with a certain measure of suspicion, and then he comes over to the United States, like I said, viewed with certain suspicion. What would be a better way to demonstrate your loyalties, despite your tendency to get yourself mixed up in a bit of organized crime, than to provide intelligence to your adopted home country by speaking to the FBI, and at the same time throwing people perhaps off your scent and onto the scent of, I don't know, competing mobsters who might be getting deals that you wanted a piece of but were excluded from before. There are lots of strange motivations working everywhere. But earlier we were very impressed with the willingness of a American-born woman of Iranian descent's willingness to step up and serve the George W. Bush administration and her home country, not adopted, but her real legitimate home country, by dispelling any suspicions that arose from her Iranian-American heritage. We liked that one. We have doubts about this other one. But then again, she's never been convicted of organized crime activity. And he has. I don't think she's ever stabbed anybody in the face in a bar fight either. Fragments of Sater's work for the government have leaked out, partly because Sater himself has bragged about, quote, building Trump towers by day and hunting bin Laden by night. The guy is a I don't know what, the Chuck Barris / Forrest Gump of the Trump world. But his cloak and dagger claims of chasing down terrorists were often dismissed as wildly unlikely, while Sater himself remained an obsession of many investigators, professional and amateur, searching for Trump's Russia connection. Now, BuzzFeed News has obtained the statement Sater gave under oath to House Intelligence Committee investigators at his attorney's office in December when they interviewed him extensively and corroborated many details of his spy thriller account through legal documents, emails, letters, and interviews with 10 current and former law enforcement and intelligence officials familiar with his undercover work. At the direction of the FBI, the Department of Justice stated in a newly unsealed court filing, Sater traveled to the Middle East after 9/11 to collect, quote, valuable intelligence on, quote, key leaders in Al-Qaeda, and he helped, quote, in a number of other areas, including Russian organized crime, unquote. In other court filings, the Justice Department said Sater's work on behalf of the United States, quote, involves 18 foreign governments, unquote, as well as, quote, there's a lot of quoting here, various families of La Cosa Nostra, and that his help was, quote, of extraordinary depth and breadth. Specific exploits confirmed by BuzzFeed News include, let's do it the bullet point way like they do. 1. He obtained 5 of the personal satellite telephone numbers for Osama bin Laden before 9/11, and he helped flip the personal secretary to Mullah Omar, then the head of the Taliban and an ally of bin Laden, into a source who provided the location of al-Qaeda training camps and weapons caches. In 2004, he persuaded a source in Russia's foreign military intelligence to hand over the name and photographs of a North Korean military operative who was purchasing equipment to build the country's nuclear arsenal. Sater later provided U.S. intelligence with details about possible assassination threats against former President George W. Bush and Secretary of State Colin Powell. Sater reported that jihadists were hiding out in a hut outside Bagram Air Base and planned to shoot down Powell's plane during a January 2002 visit. He later told his handlers that 2 female al-Qaeda members were trying to recruit an Afghan woman working in the Senate barber shop to poison President Bush or Vice President Dick Cheney. Did they often frequent the Senate barber shop? I don't know. He went undercover in Cyprus, and Istanbul, Turkey, yowza, to catch Russian and Ukrainian cyber criminals around 2005. After the FBI set him up with a fake name and background, Sater posed as a money launderer. You think that was difficult for him? To help nab the suspects for washing funds stolen from U.S. financial institutions. This could be a complex story. The CIA, DIA, FBI, and leaders of the House Intelligence Committee all declined to comment. I would think that would probably go without saying, but okay. Over the past month, 2 BuzzFeed News reporters met frequently with Sater in Los Angeles, where he's been living since February, and which seems to suit him. He's tan. He had his Porsche shipped from Long Island. He gets the good table at Delilah, a CNBC in West Hollywood nightclub. He said he is telling his full story, long kept secret by the government, to clear his name. I am being given no choice because of the ongoing Trump investigations, he said. The media lies about me. I wonder. The revelations about his clandestine work for the United States complicate an already complicated figure, revealing a man who thrives on mixing espionage, politics, and business, often playing one off the other to his own advantage. Sater, who recently turned 52, started out as a stockbroker who lost his license after he assaulted a man in a bar brawl. He helped scam investors out of tens of millions of dollars in the mid-1990s. He later emerged as a partner to the Trump Organization and a senior advisor to Trump himself, raising money for the future president and his family on projects such as Trump Soho, the troubled hotel that nearly led to fraud charges against Ivanka Trump and her brother Donald Jr. Even as he was helping U.S. intelligence and law enforcement agencies, Sater racked up enemies in his business dealings. An Arizona man said Sater threatened to cut his legs off during a failed development deal. Florida investors said his company, Bayrock, ripped them off. A former colleague said in a lawsuit that the entire Bayrock operation was run by organized crime figures and that Sater threatened to have him killed if he didn't cooperate. Sater denied doing any of those things. But he doesn't deny that he's always looking for an angle. Why, that shifty guy. As the Trump campaign kicked off into high gear in 2015, Sater saw an opportunity. And maybe the opportunity was, if my friend is president of the United States, I'll never have to worry about being picked up on any of these crimes ever again. There's an awful lot here, and I thought maybe at this point, having given you a flavor of what's in store, let's take a look at some of the, maybe, I think, pushback onto pushback by grabbing, for instance, this piece in Slate from Ben Mathis Lilly, headlined, "Bonkers Profile of Trump crony Felix Sater Suggests He is the Kind of Guy Who Wouldn't Mind Working with Robert Mueller." That might be of interest, and this is a much shorter piece. Let's see if this helps us sum things up. Trump's connections to a gentleman named Felix Sater have long been one of the more tantalizing threads of the Russia special counsel story. Sater, as you know, Russia-born ex-con who helped Trump raise money for real estate projects in the 2000s, a process that, according to a disgruntled former partner of Sater's, involved laundering money that originated in Russia. Sater, in other words, might have information about Trump's connections to Russians who held incriminating information about him before the 2016 campaign got underway. What a wild new BuzzFeed News profile of Sater seems to suggest, in addition to being a bonkers crazy story, is that he's also the kind of guy who would definitely sell Trump out if he thought it would be even marginally useful to him personally. It's been reported publicly before that Sater was given a lenient sentence in a racketeering case in exchange for his work as a federal informant on matters including black market missile sales. BuzzFeed's story, based, it says, on legal documents, emails, letters, etc., corroborates those reports and says Sater was also crucial to other intelligence operations that yielded such information as phone numbers for Osama bin Laden and the location of a training camp that Bill Clinton famously ordered a missile strike on during the height of the Monica Lewinsky scandal. You remember that? The excerpt offered here from the piece. In August 1998, President Bill Clinton authorized Operation Infinite Reach, a bombing strike against al-Qaeda in retaliation for the terror attacks on the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, which killed 224 people. Sater, 10 current and former intelligence and law enforcement officials said, supplemented U.S. intelligence by providing location coordinates for al-Qaeda camps that the U.S. military ultimately bombed in Khost, Afghanistan. And as I recall, Clinton was, of course, accused of wagging the dog to try to distract from the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Republicans at that time derided the strikes as worthless. I don't remember if that was the one that they said, oh, you bombed an aspirin factory or something like that. That might have been a different one. But how interesting that the guy turns up again, this time as the ally of the Republican president, who might also stab him in the back. Wow. In other words, Slate's article continues, Sater wasn't just a guy desperately trying to convince prosecutors he had useful international connections in order to get out from underneath a racketeering bust. He was a guy who did have useful international connections, and used them to very successfully get out from under a racketeering bust. CIA officials were skeptical of Sater's claim about black market missiles, BuzzFeed says, until he sent them photographs of the missiles that featured serial numbers and, quote, a copy of a daily newspaper to prove the photo was current. You know that trick. Almost everyone in Donald Trump's orbit involved in the Russia story comes across as either too incompetent to have done anything of consequence, Carter Page, Sam Nunberg, George Papadopoulos, too much of a toady to ever totally sell Trump out, Hope Hicks, Mike Flynn, Michael Cohen, too deeply involved in whatever malfeasance took place to do anything except fight Robert Mueller until the very end, Paul Manafort, or all three, Jared Kushner. That's not to say people in those groups can't still be useful to Mueller in some fashion, but Sater, in BuzzFeed's profile, seems like someone who is both smart enough to have carried out a key part of a criminal conspiracy and confident enough in his own ability as an independent hustler to decide that enthusiastic participation with Mueller's team, which includes a prosecutor he worked with as an informant before, by the way, is the right move. For what it's worth, BuzzFeed says Sater, quote, has been questioned by Mueller's team, unquote, but, quote, won't say what he was asked or what information he provided, unquote, which is actually the proper way of handling things, for once. Also, Sater once, quote, told his spy handlers that the two female al-Qaeda members trying to recruit an Afghan woman in a Senate barbershop, told that story, trying to poison President Bush or Vice President Dick Cheney. So there is that. And that ends the Slate article. Lots of people, though, writing about this and following up on it. A search for Felix Sater in Google News turns up several more recent hits. Felix Sater touts years as U.S. intel assets, but offers few insights, ABC News says, few insights on what? Oh, it just trails off after that, but may also bring us some auto-playing video there. Few insights on what? I don't know. Google News won't tell us the rest of it, but ABC News reports under the headline of Soviet-born Donald Trump advisor Felix Sater, send him to jail. if Robert Mueller finds collusion. Okay. I'd like to be able to do that. Let's see. It seems I've closed the wrong window on those things. But there's a Politico article on the subject as well. They seem to summarize things pretty quickly. So I think we got out of those later digests a lot of the hottest items out of the much longer article that BuzzFeed put together. And there's still no way I'm going to be able to get through all of this stuff in a single show. But there's some very interesting stories and some very interesting photos accompanying them that I think you'll find worth reviewing and worth having in pocket for this weekend. And I think Felix Sater is going to become a hot news property in the next couple of days. And you need to be aware of, like I said, the counter narrative that Felix Sater might ultimately be. You can't just say he's a good guy in all of this, but he may end up, in fact, spilling the beans in ways that other Trump associates won't, because there's no upside, no escape mechanism for them. They can work out a plea deal and spend less time in jail, or maybe even no time in jail, if they give up the goods, but they're still in trouble and they're discredited. But Felix Sater, I think, is relatively unique among this group in that he can say, come on, just like old times, I'll give you the information, you let me skate. And because he's got that track record out there, I don't know if it's a good one, but you can't characterize it as good. I think it makes him... Warlock is asking, why do we need to be aware of Sater? Well, we always needed to be aware of him because he was mixed up in the middle of all this stuff. But the reason I think you need to know his name is, like I'm saying, I think he's uniquely positioned in the center of at least one of the rings in orbit around Donald Trump. And they're different ones, and they handle different things, although he seems to have a hand in almost everything, who can reasonably expect to be able to rat him out and take a golden parachute out of it. Manafort can't. They weren't willing to offer him anything worth taking, so he's going to risk it on trial. Gates found a way out, but he had to turncoat on him in order to do it. Papadopoulos had to give up information. He didn't have the greatest stuff in the world. But everybody else is basically being forced to roll over, whereas he's able to provide real information. Now, Warlock says, my Republican contacts just tend to ignore Russian stuff, as they will, because they tend to ignore anything that, whether right or wrong, they're going to ignore it because they don't want their president to be in trouble. But this is a guy who's gone way, way back, not only with Donald Trump, but also with at least one of Mueller's chosen investigators and with U.S. intelligence and the FBI as well. And they're used to brokering deals with this guy in exchange for information. We'll let you slide, we'll let you skate. And they also are aware that they have put him in the middle of international situations in which he really would perhaps be able to deliver actionable, usable intelligence, not just bragging or talking out of his ass the way Donald Trump usually does. Although I will say, up until this reporting, I might have guessed, this guy really doesn't know anything. I mean, if you can corroborate that who comes up with Osama bin Laden's satellite telephone number? Could you do it? I couldn't. Who comes up with information that there are Al-Qaeda operatives hiding in a hut outside Bagram Air Force? I could have guessed that for you. But to tell you where it is and how would he know about it? He was involved in the attempt to make clandestine sales of surface-to-air missiles. Who would be wanting to use that? People shooting down planes outside of Bagram Air Force Base. Let's see. A few other comments, by the way. Bob will speak, Culture of Truth, saying, very unfair to say Felix Sater seems like someone who would stab you in the back. Given his history, Sater is clearly a guy who would stab you right in the front. And that's true. Let's see. I didn't see this one before. Kate Sherrill also, I guess, alerting us to a short, thankfully, weird news story out of Russia. Make it rain. Diamonds, gold, and silver bars worth millions fall from a plane over Russia. I did see that one. Apparently, the doors on a cargo plane broke on takeoff, and they were, just for whatever reason, flying a huge cache of diamonds, gold, and silver bars worth millions to places unknown, and I guess they sprinkled them out behind them. I don't know whether it all fell on the runway and they were able to recover a lot of it, or they just actually dropped that over the landscape. But it says here, a Russian plane taking off in Siberia, its cargo door buckled under the shifting weight, bursting open and scattering nearly 200 bars of gold and silver on the runway. I hope they didn't drop them on anybody's house, although if you got to have something come crashing through your roof, gold bars and diamonds, I guess, if they don't hit you, would be among the best. So apparently the plane figured it out pretty quickly and landed about 16 miles away from where it took off. So they didn't have the opportunity to sprinkle too much stuff all over the place. Anyway, everybody talking about Felix Sater and I guess his alleged interest in letting the chips fall where they may. The big headline from ABC News, send Trump to jail if Mueller finds collusion. That doesn't really mean that much. A lot of people were willing to say that. They just will never believe that Mueller found collusion. They may deny that it ever happened, or they may just say the conclusion you've reached is wrong. Let's see. CNN has written on him recently. Trump business associate Sater speaks out on Russia ties. Businessman says Trump sent him to Russia to look after his kids. That 29 minutes ago. This is the sort of thing that I think is going to come spilling out over the weekend. It's spilling out right now. Mid-show. Businessman says Trump sent him to Russia to look after his kids, which is apparently a different story than the kids themselves and others have told in the past about that trip. Sater, it says here, says Trump, it says the then business magnate Trump asked him to, quote, look after his kids while they were pursuing business deals in Russia. Sater told CNN's Chris Cuomo on New Day, Friday, that's today, that Trump had personally asked him to travel to Russia to be in Moscow with his children. The president asked me to be in Russia at the same time to look after them. The Trump Organization's general counsel previously had said Sater was not accompanying the children in Moscow, and Trump himself has downplayed his connections to Sater. Remember, I wouldn't know him in a lineup. If he were sitting here in this room, I'm not sure I could identify him. I want you to go to Russia and protect my children, personally look after them. Although I cannot see you right now and couldn't identify you if I wanted to. I mean, does that mean anything? Remember, they quote him here. Felix Sater, boy, I have to even think about it. Trump said in a December 2015 Associated Press interview, I'm not that familiar with him. Sater, CNN is writing here, a mob-linked felon turned FBI informant is speaking out now after he has figured prominently amid questions about Trump's connections to Russia for his role in trying to land Trump Tower in Moscow in late 2015 and early 2016 when the presidential campaign was underway. There was, of course, that letter of intent. Sater worked with Michael Cohen on the deal. Emails exchanged between the two show that Sater thought the deal could get Donald elected. But Sater, born in the Soviet Union, moved to the U.S. as a child, said Friday he did not have connections to Putin's government, even though Sater had earlier suggested that he could get Putin to say great things about Trump if the deal went through. So some very contradictory information out there. I assume that will be the subject of much discussion over the weekend, and that's why I think we need to have him back on our radar. Whether or not Republicans are willing to believe anything he said, or whether or not we ought to be willing to believe what he said, I think he's just going to be in the news, and therefore we need to have him on our radar once again. Okay. Plus, of course, just a very entertaining story. The idea that a guy could be involved in so many shady things, so many gray area of the intersection of international terrorism, international intrigue, international espionage, international terrorism. I guess all these things do come together. If you watch enough mob dramas like The Sopranos, right, and you find out, or The Wire, the weird interconnections between American organized crime and international terrorism. You need to find money and or material that has no paper trail and has to be stolen and shipped, and you got to have people willing to look the other way. There's going to be an interconnection. And if somebody like that flips, it could be really interesting. And then, like I said, I think he's uniquely positioned to be able to expect a reasonable shot at a total escape entirely from any prosecution and still come out possibly looking good and able to work in whatever it is you would call his area of expertise on the other side. Not so, and not as easily available, I think, for other witnesses, and I think that's what makes him special. All right, time to give up on trying to make sense of the world for you before Friday ends and hand over the microphone to Justice Putnam, who will make his attempt at it on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next. What do we got here? Let's see. MSNBC editor-at-large John Harwood rips Trump for BSing Trudeau based on simplistic, out-of-touch economic voodoo and lying about
From
the whole
Daily
thing.
Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Stories also about an Arkansas student submitting to corporal punishment for participating in the national walkout, and a Montana Green Party Senate candidate was only recently actually on the GOP payroll and suddenly currently running a nativist anti-college group. There's so much more that he'll bring you next.